Summertime is here, and we are excited about all that God is going to do through camps and missions trips and all sorts of stuff. What we see a lot of times in the summer, though, is we have these great encounters with God, and He does great things, but then the fall comes. We kind of go back to normal. Well, tonight, we're going to challenge that as we talk about the tension between how far we want to go and how far we're willing to go. I encourage you to really dive deep and really hear God's voice tonight. We want to hear what God's doing in your life as well, so be sure to leave a comment down there on our video and follow all of our social media pages. Enjoy service tonight.
A lot of the noise if he's clapping. Okay, so we've been going through what it means to be set apart. We've been going A to Z. We are actually all the way up to the letter N. Does anybody remember some of the letters that we've gone through in order? A was assess and assimilate. Battle the barriers. Cultivate the connections. Decide on the daily. Ooh. Envision. The elevation. All right, good job. Fan the flame.
Give yourself grace.
Okay.
Hark the herald.
Yeah. Annihilate with an I. Annihilate. Inspect. Inspire your insides. Join the justified, not just kidding. Key in on the kingdom. Come on, there you go. L. Locate the lines. All right. Merge the movement. What? All right. Nullify the noise. All right, Luke. I'm sorry. That was amazing. All right. That was amazing. That was so good. So, all right. So tonight, we're not doing none of that. All right. We're going to take a break from that for a little while. Tonight, we're actually going to be talking about movies. Tonight, Pastor Dylan is going to talk to you about his favorite movie as he talks about want versus willingness. And the message tonight is Peter went to church camp.
Well, as he said, we're going to take a break from our A to Z stuff. We're gonna preach a message called Peter Went to Church Camp. Peter went to church camp. So we talked about your favorite movies, right? Talked about your favorite movies. Man, I love sports movies. Okay, who loves sports movies? What'd you say? Oh, okay, that's not what I had. That one is a good one. Who said Rookie of the Year? All right, I got 4 sports movies for you. You ready?
What is it? Remember the Titans.
That's a good one. That's another good one. All of the man, I should have redone this list. These are not my favorite sports movies, but these are some because those that you mentioned are good. Remember the Titans is good. Yeah. All right. The Sandlot. It's a great movie. Great movie. Right? Radio. Some of y'all don't even know about Radio. Radio, man, that'll make you cry. That movie's awesome. Facing the Giants. It's a good one. These are not like necessarily in order, like I said. There's some of y'all's probably would have made the list before. Here's another one. How about this one? High School Musical. That's a great sports movie, huh? You don't think it's a sports movie?
It's a musical.
No, it's a sports movie. Who's seen High School Musical? Okay. High School Musical is a sports. Let me explain to you what happens in High School Musical to prove to you that it's a sports movie. Okay, this boy meets a girl in the summer. The girl happens to move to the same school, and this relationship starts, and the girl likes science and school things and is really smart, and the boy likes sports, right? Basketball, sports movie, gotta get you ahead of the game, right? That's a whole song in the movie. You can't deny that, right? But they both want to sing, and all their friends are like, oh, that's weird. And then there's this girl that tries to split them all up, and yeah. Everybody's always sorry. Now listen, in all three High School Musicals, have y'all seen all 3?
Yes.
In all 3, everything starts out happy and great. This tension or this problem is presented. It either makes or breaks this couple, Troy and Gabriella. and then they come back together, right? Totally a sports movie, right? Y'all see the connection? Okay, so it's not a sports movie, it's a drama. Who likes drama movies? Like drama movies? Why do we love drama movies? Why do we just love to get engulfed in false problems that don't exist, right? Some of y'all trying to live a drama movie. That's a whole nother sermon. All right. But every drama movie goes like this. It has a happy beginning. Listen, it has this happy beginning. There's this tension or a problem that the couple deals with. Y'all gotta pay attention, right? Tension or problem this couple deals with. And then there's this happy ending every time, right? That's how drama movies work, right? Every time. For whatever reason, we go crazy about these movies. We think they are the most awesome and amazing thing in the world. Like, oh my goodness, it's so great. But the unfortunate truth that I find is, unfortunately, we a lot of times approach our walk with God like it's a drama movie. Okay, what do I mean? It seems often that there's a lot of highs and lows and rises and dips. And things are great, things are not great. Things are phenomenal. I'm in the worst place that I've ever been in. And what happens is we have these great, awesome, amazing times with God, and then it seems like right after that we're in one of the worst, awful, disconnected places we've ever been in our walk with God. And so we are approaching summer, right? In youth ministry, as a youth leader, this is the craziest time of the year for youth ministry, right? There's camps, there's nationals, this year there's missions trips, there's all sorts of different things, right? And some of you are going to experience many of these things. Some of you are like, look, I'm not experiencing any of this, but the summer really is a time for me to experience a spiritual high because, man, I'm just getting to rest. I'm just getting to regroup, and I'm really getting to spend time with God. So, whether you're going to camp, whether you're going to nationals, whether you're going to Africa, or whether you're just getting to completely reset and rest, it's an opportunity for you in the summer to really experience great, powerful moves of God, right? But fall is coming. What's going to happen? Are we going to experience God in incredible ways? Are we going to lead people to Christ in Africa? Are we going to have these awesome encounters with God at camp? Are we going to invite God into our room as we have time to rest and regroup and just experience His presence and then just go back to the way things were when the fall comes? We experience these great highs and then we experience these low lows. And we brush up against the greatness that God wants us to do and we're like, yeah, that's a little uncomfortable. Let me just go back to normal. But see, what happens is these things are meant to be foundational for us to go deeper. These things are meant for us to take a step and then take a greater step and then take a greater step and do all these great things for God. But it ends up being this up and down ride with God a lot of times. Who's been there? I've been there. I've been there. And I just want to say this. Don't think that this is just something you experience as a student. Don't convince yourself that, oh, I'm just going to experience this as a youth, and then when I get older and more spiritual, I'm not going to experience that. No, we as adults, I'm sure all of the adults in the room can tell you they've experienced these ups and then these downs and these backs and these forths, and it's a roller coaster ride, right? I've experienced times like this in my life. I remember going to camp and having great encounters with God and then come home and be in even deeper sin than God freed me from at camp. I've experienced this. I've gone on evangelistic outreach opportunities and see people come to know Christ and then right after go back to my own self-absorbing Christianity mindset where it's all about me growing and what God can give me. I've had mighty encounters with God even in my own bedroom, only to slip right back into laziness, complacency, and minimal living. See, what happens a lot of times is these moments, these great encounters with God where we're seeing people saved and we're encountering Him and we're having these great moments. They're meant to shape us and mold us and to push us into deeper places than we are now, but we end up on this dramatic roller coaster ride of spiritual highs and spiritual lows like we're in some drama movie, right? I want to talk to you tonight about a guy whose story seems to have a lot of these highs and lows, like he's in some kind of drama movie. We're going to talk about Peter, and we're going to call this message, Peter Went to Church Camp. So, we're going to read a few scriptures. We're going to start in Matthew chapter 26, not that Matthew, this Matthew. Matthew 26, 31 through 35. It says this, it says, on the way Jesus told them, tonight all of you will desert me. For the scripture said, God will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there. Peter declared, even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you. Jesus replied, I'll tell you the truth, Peter. This very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. No, Peter insisted. Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you. And the other disciples vowed the same. Here's what's happening in this scripture, okay? Jesus is letting them know what's about to take place. He's about to get arrested. He's about to get crucified. He's letting them know what's going to take place. And Jesus, in so much love and grace and mercy, is like, listen, every one of you are going to turn your back. It's okay because I love you. It's okay because I planned for this. It's all right. We're going to make it through this, all right? And then here's Peter. Excuse me, Jesus. I don't think you really know me. I don't think you know me, Jesus, because I'm Peter. Yeah, I know you said all these guys are going to desert you, but no, I'm Peter. You must forgot I'm Peter. I'm Peter. Jesus, I'm Peter. I'm not going to desert you, right? And then, he spoke too soon, right? And then Jesus, in a loving way, Jesus could have said, dude, sit down, stop. Like, you're embarrassing yourself, right? Jesus is like, well, no, Peter, actually, you're going to deny me 3 times. But I wasn't going to bring that up, but since you started the conversation, you're going to deny me 3 times. Now, if it's me, I'm like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have spoke up. I probably shouldn't have said anything. I'm just going to sit on right back down. Peter's like, you're wrong, Jesus. What? He's like, you're wrong, Jesus. Even if all of them desert you, not me. I'll die with you. I'll die with you if I have to, but I'm not going to deny you, right? Here's where Peter's at, all right? Peter's in kind of like this puppy love stage, okay, of his relationship with Jesus. Now, before I go further, do not misunderstand what I'm saying. By no means at all, everybody listen to this because it's important. By no means at all am I saying Peter and Jesus had a romantic love. So don't twist this, okay? Do not twist this. I'm more talking about comparing the relationship of a dramatic TV to like our relationship with Jesus, just for clarification to get that out there. But this is like the puppy love in our relationship with Jesus. I remember going to camp one time, and man, God did amazing things, and I signed up for this thing like campus ministry, and I was filling it out, and they were like, tell us about your experience. And at the end of it, I wrote, I dare the enemy to attack me. Okay, I probably shouldn't have said that, right? Like, sometimes we get so excited that we're just like, oh, I'm gonna go. And that's what Peter's doing here. He's like, I'm gonna die with you. And Jesus is like, okay, well, you're not there yet, Peter. Actually, I know how the story ends. I just wasn't gonna embarrass you, right? You know? But I've been there, right? It's kind of like this puppy love kind of thing in our relationship with God. But the story progresses, okay? The story progresses to where Jesus gets arrested in Luke 22, 54 through 61. So they arrested him and led him to the high priest's home, and Peter followed at a distance. That's a whole sermon. The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. A servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. I thought about that earlier. I was like, that was probably kind of just looking at you. I know you. I'm going to speak any minute. Anyway, just staring at him. Finally, she said, this man was one of Jesus' followers. But Peter denied it. Woman, he said, I don't even know him. After a while, someone else looked at him and said, you must be one of them. No, man, I'm not. Peter retorted. After an hour later, someone else insisted, this must be one of them, because he is a Galilean too. But Peter said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. But before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even knew me. Man, Peter was feeling on top of the world. I'm going to die with you, Jesus. And I bet in this moment, he's kind of feeling a little low, right? Like, man, Jesus told me this was going to happen. And I tried to correct him, and then it happened, and then he just turns and looks at me. Imagine the shame, the regret, the pain that he felt in that moment. And we've been there, right? It's one thing to mess up and fall short in your walk with God when you're ignorant, right? When you don't really understand, you're trying to grow. Like, okay, I didn't realize this was a mistake and I just messed up. That's one thing. But man, do y'all know how it feels to mess up with that same thing that constantly trips you up? It's frustrating, right? It's like, man, like, I didn't want to steal again. Couldn't I have just told a lie? Like, we feel like we've convinced ourselves somehow that one sin's worse than the other because this sin, it always trips us up and it bothers us more, right? It's one thing to mess up when you're ignorant, but that thing that constantly trips you up, or you know Jesus was like, hey, this is going to happen. Hey, you're going to mess up. Hey, you're going to fall short. Don't do this. Don't do this. And we do it anyway. Doesn't that feel destroying inside a lot of times? I bet we felt like Peter felt, where Jesus was just looking at Peter, right? And so what happens, it creates so much frustration in us, and the tension that we deal with becomes clear. We want to do great things for God, but we don't really know if we're willing to do these things. And this frustration, it creates this self-condemnation mindset. Like, we beat ourselves up. We tell us, man, we're not good enough. And we start thinking that this going deeper in Jesus thing, well, that must be for everyone else. We can't go to those deep places with God. It's for everyone else. And what happens is, because we start to think, because we feel like we're a screw up, we feel like we mess things up, we set our own limits with how far we can go with God, and we're like, well, at least I made it this far. I don't really know if I can go deeper. But I want to show you the incredible thing that happens in this story. See, Peter and Jesus lock eyes, right? Peter knew he messed up. And Jesus knew he messed up, right? And I can imagine what Peter probably thinks that Jesus is thinking. If I'm Peter and Jesus locks eyes after I just did the very thing I told him I wouldn't do, he's probably thinking that Jesus is like, man, Peter, I told you this was going to happen. Why did you not listen to me? Is it even worth dying for you anymore if you're just going to continue to mess up? You messed this whole thing up. And Peter probably had these thoughts that he probably thought Jesus was thinking these things, but it was actually far from the reality. See, here's what Jesus probably was more accurately thinking. He was probably thinking, Peter, I knew this was going to happen, but it's okay because you're still worth it. This is the very reason I'm doing this, so that you can have another chance. Peter, I love you, and I'm going to go and I'm going to turn around and go die for you anyway. Right? And I know this is something you've probably heard 1,000 times, but I need to stop right here and I need to say this, man. You may be in a place where you feel like you can't get anything right, where you're beating yourself up, where you feel like you can't go to deeper places with God, and that you think it's for everybody else and God just doesn't love you the same. Listen, God knew you were going to mess up. God knew your mistakes. He accounted for them. He looked your mistakes in the face, and then he turned around and said, I'm going to die for you anyway. Here's what you need to know. Jesus did not use your mistakes as an excuse to not go to the cross, but rather it was the reason he went there. It was the reason he went there. And you may be in a place where you're just beating yourself up and ripping yourself apart. Listen, there's a God that loves you. And don't let that be taken lightly. There's a God that loves you, that accounted for your mistakes, and is there to bring you back to the place where you were meant to be all along. He died for you anyways. But imagine how Peter felt in this moment, okay? I mean, imagine. Man, you gave your whole life for this guy. He told you you're going to mess up. You tried to correct him. Like when Jesus is like, hey, don't do that. It's going to get you into temptation. We're like, nah, Jesus, I'm good. And then we fall into the sin anyway. Man, it's so destroying on the inside. Peter was just like, I'm going back to fishing, right? And he goes back to fishing, but he had this great, where he felt like he was on top of the world, and then he comes crashing down. And then the story seems to get better again in John 21. Look at it on the screen. It said, later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there. Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. We'll come too, they all said. So they went on the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, fellows, have you caught any fish? No, they replied. Then he said, throw out your net to the other side of the boat, and then you'll get some. So they all did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there was so many fish in it. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped it for work, jumped into the water, and headed to the shore. The other disciples stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards from shore. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. Bring some of the fish you caught, Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to the shore. There were 153 large fish, and yet the net had not torn. Now come and have some breakfast, Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead. After breakfast, here's this moment, this key moment that I want to key in on. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Because if you remember, Peter had said, even if they don't turn their back on you, even if they turn their back on you, I'm going to follow you. So he's referring back to that moment where he tried to correct Jesus. Yes, Lord, Peter replied, you know I love you. Feed my lambs, Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said. You know I love you. That's twice that he's asked. Then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. A 3rd time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? This was the 3rd time. He denied Jesus 3 times, and Jesus asked him 3 times if he loved him. Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question the 3rd time. He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. I tell you the truth. When you were young, you were able to do as you liked. You dressed yourself and went wherever you wanted to go. But when you were old, you will stretch out your hands and others will dress you and take you where you don't want to go. Jesus said this to let him know the kind of death he would glorify the Lord. Then Jesus told him, follow me. And so we have this moment where Peter had this great, awesome encounter. He's like, I'm gonna die for you, Jesus. And he has this great low where he fell into the very thing Jesus warned him about. Jesus goes and he dies, and then he raises again, and he's appearing to the disciples. See, Peter thought the story was over. Peter thought there was no hope. Peter thought there was no going back. And now Peter has an opportunity to make all things right because Jesus gave him this opportunity. And what's crazy is Peter was called by Jesus when he was fishing. Now he's being redeemed when he's fishing, and they're having breakfast. And this conversation between Peter and Jesus is the climax of our story. See, because Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? Peter says, yes, I love you. Now, our English translation has one word for love. But when you look at the words that Jesus and Peter were using here, it actually shows the tension that was taking place. See, the word for love that Jesus used was agapes, or however you say it. In its biblical usage, this often speaks of a giving, uncaused, unselfish love. That I'm gonna do no matter what the cost is. No matter what it's gonna cost me. I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna give everything to you. This is the kind of love that Jesus asked Peter if he had. But Peter did not respond with the same kind of love. The kind of love that Peter answered the question with was the word phileo, which is, in the biblical usage, speaks of a more reciprocated love or a friendly affection. And so this tension becomes clear. Jesus is saying, Peter, do you love me no matter what? Are you willing to die for me? Are you willing to give everything in your life for me? You had no chance. I gave you a chance. Are you willing to give every part of yourself to me? And Peter's response is essentially, Jesus, you did that for me, so we're friends. You see, they're not really on the same page here. Okay? Jesus is asking Peter if he's willing to give him everything. And Peter in this moment is like, we're friends, Jesus. And so in a drama TV show, here's how this would play out. See, Peter would answer Jesus, and actually the last time he does ask him the phileo, a friendly kind of love, but he would answer Jesus would answer Peter the third time if this was a movie, and he would say, well then Peter, are you sorry? Do you promise that you'll never do it again? If you're sorry and you promise that you'll never do it again, then we can go back to the way things were before. And if Jesus would have answered Peter like this, like it was a drama movie, it would have the happy ending. It would have the happily ever after. Things go back to normal. Things go back to the way that they're supposed to be. But this is not how Jesus responds to Peter. Look at what he says. He says, I tell you the truth, when you were young, you were able to do as you liked. You dressed yourself and went wherever you wanted to go. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and others will dress you and take you where you don't want to go. He was trying to tell Peter, he said this to indicate the kind of death that Peter would have to die. He said this to indicate to Peter, listen, Peter, this is your moment of redemption, and I'm going to restore you, and I'm going to redeem you. But in order for this to take place, you have to understand, you're going to have to give your life for me. That's the way your story ends if you're going to follow me. And Peter has an opportunity to end this like every single drama movie ever ended. He has the opportunity to once again, where he made the mistake and said, I'll die for you, to say it this time and to mean it. He has the opportunity to say, Jesus, I'm willing to give it all to you. Let's go. But when Jesus says, you have an opportunity for redemption and to go all out and to give me everything, Peter's response is he turns and he looks at the person next to him and says, well, what about that guy, Jesus? See, Peter wasn't willing to deal with the tension inside. See, there's this tension inside of all of us that we're going to have to deal with. Every single one of us would say we want to go deeper with God. Every single one of us would say we want to see the power of the Holy Spirit manifest in our life. Every single one of us would say we want to see salvation all around. Every single one of us would say we want a prayer life like never before, where we intercede for people and lives are changed and we're operating in the gifts of the Holy Spirit and all these things are taking place. Every one of us would say that we want to see these things. But the tension is created when we ask the question, are we willing to go where we need to go in order to see these things? See, Peter wanted to go deeper. Peter wanted to have a great relationship with God. Peter wanted to go to all of these great places. And I'm sure if you asked him, do you want to die for Jesus? He would say, and he did say that, I want to die for you, Jesus. But when it came down to actually be willing to do that, he was like, well, what about that guy instead? See, there's this tension inside of all of us between where you want to go with Jesus and where you're willing to go with Jesus. All right? Listen. There's this tension inside of all of us between where you want to go with Jesus and how far you're willing to go with Jesus. See, so many of us, I can go around the room and look at stories of where God has brought you. He's brought you out of some some junk. He's brought me, our leaders as well. He's brought us out of dark places and given us the opportunity to have life with him. But if we're constantly in our relationship with God saying, man, look where God brought me, then what happens is we become these old Christians that sit on our front porch and remember the good old days. But listen, Jesus brought you to this place not so that you could just talk about where he's brought you, but it's because he wants to take you to a deeper place. And listen, where you're at, staying there is not what God wanted you to do. Even if he's brought you great places, even if he's done incredible things in your life, the place that he brought you is not where he meant for you to stay. He has more for you. And I know every single one of us would say, man, I want to go there. But are you willing to go there? Are you willing to go there? You can start that music. And so what I'm worried about, what I've seen so many times in youth ministry, even when I was a student, and this seems to be this story of so many teenagers around America. We have great, awesome, spiritual, action-packed summers with Jesus, where we see great moves of God. He does an incredible work inside of us. He does an incredible work through us. And then we go back to the status quo when fall comes. But what would happen if we said this summer is going to be different? I'm not just going to stay in one spot. I'm not just going to encounter God for a moment, but I'm going to use this as a building block. Encounters aren't meant to be experiences. They're meant to be building blocks. And I just want to say this. When I was praying earlier, God kind of added this to the message. We say we're called. Man, God's got a calling on my life. We say we have desire. Man, I want to go deep. Listen, calling and desire are not the same thing as willingness. You can be called of God to reach thousands, and it means nothing if you're sitting on the sidelines. You can be called by God to go to deeper places, and it means nothing if you're just sitting there and waiting for it to happen. There's no question you want to do these things. There's no question you desire to step into the calling, to step into the greatness God has for you. But are you willing? Peter, I feel like, now here's what you need to understand. In this moment, yeah, Peter wasn't willing to deal with this tension. He's like, what about John? But Peter got to a place where he was willing to deal with this. He was saying, you know what? I'm going to let my willingness match my desire. See, Peter ended up being someone that God used to be baptized in the Holy Spirit. And Peter actually ended up dying this death that Jesus said he was going to live. Why? Because he was willing to say, my want and my willingness don't match up right now, but I want them to. And your want to do greatness and your desire to see God do great things in your life and through your life isn't enough. You've got to be willing. It's not just going to happen. We've created callings in ministry and going deeper with God like it's this thing that we're just going to snap our fingers one day and be on a stage in front of 1,000. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that. You've got to develop. You've got to grow. You've got to say, I'm not going to be afraid anymore. I'm going to work through this sin issue. I'm going to deal with this. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to allow this to be taken out of my life so that I can step into the greatness. You've got to be willing to make change even if you don't see results right away. Want and desire and calling are not the same thing as willingness. So tonight, we're going to deal with this tension. How far do you want to go versus how far are you willing to go? This altar call is going to be a little different. We could invite the leaders up and pray over you, pray with you and things like that. But you have an opportunity tonight. Each one of you are different places. Some of you go into camps. Some of you go to missions trips. Some of you have the opportunity to really spend time with God this summer because things are slowing down. We're all at different places. Regardless, you have an opportunity this summer for God to do incredible things inside of you and incredible things through you. And all of that's great, and I'm excited for those things. But where are you gonna be when September rolls around? We talked about cast a vision, right? We gotta stop keeping the spiritual moments in the spiritual moments. And we gotta start being spiritual beings that grow and progress. And so if you're in here tonight and you're like, man, I got this tension inside of me and I just want to say I've been in this place for so long. I've been so hungry to go deeper, and I feel like I'm right on the verge of things. And for the longest time, I'm like, God, I'm right there. I want to go deeper. What is it? Take me to these places. And God told me, he's like, dude, you're not willing to go there. And so I've been making some changes in my life to make sure my willingness matches my want. And I want to give you the opportunity as well. See, we're going to, in just a minute, you're going to have an opportunity to respond. But listen, it's not about this moment, okay? Because we're going to pray with you, and then you're going to go back to your seat and go back to your life, and all of that's great. And God's going to do great things here. But if you keep it in this moment, what's the point? It's not meant to be an experience. It's meant to be a building block. So what I want to do is we go into the summer. I'm going to invite you to the front just to form a line if you're willing to do these things. If you're saying, man, there's this tension inside of me of I want to go deeper, but I don't think my willingness matches my want, and I want that to change, we're going to invite you to come. If you're like, man, I know God's going to do great things in me and through me this summer, but I don't want it to stay in this summer. I want this to be a building block. We're going to invite you to come. And you're just saying, man, there's walls in my life that are keeping me from going forward, and I want those walls breaking down, then we're going to invite you to come. We're not gonna have leaders necessarily talk to you and you talk back. We just want to have you line up, and we're just going to come and we're just going to pray over you. All right, because you don't need a leader to counsel you and all of that. This is your decision to say, I'm going to let this be a building block. So if you're dealing with this tension and you want to go deeper, and you're saying that I don't want this summer to just stop in this summer, I'm going to invite you right now to just come stand up.